Hi everyone, it's Vicky here and welcome back to another Mixed Media Tuesday. Today I'm going for a double page art journal and I have here one of my journals. I have many by the way that I'm working on. This is the stone paper journal. The paper is indestructible really and I like it because it can take any type of medium without warping at all. So the inspiration for today comes from the latest collection by Stamperia, which is called Magic Forest. This is designed by Antonis Tsanidakis. Another gorgeous release by Stamperia, beautiful color combination, lovely designs to work with, and as I browse through you can see and take a look a little bit of all the focal points that can be used on a journal. For example, the deer, all that big handle would be great as well. It has lovely background papers, and this is another great focal point, this lady here. The door also, and as I browse through pattern paper I also look for focal points for my journals. So for today of course I have to use her, she's just gorgeous. And you can see how different this collection is from my collections with Stamperia, and that's what I love about it. Every month they come up with a new collection from a different designer. So depending on the style that you like, there is always something for everyone. So from this collection I did create two mini journals that I posted on my reels on Instagram, and I will post them here on YouTube as well. So this is the smallest version of this lady, as well as this one that I did. And it's always fun to create a mini journal when you have a new release because you don't use a lot of products from what you have. You can create something really quickly in a small real estate and you can get the feel of the new collection. So here today I'm going for a 2-spread journal and I'm going to start with this gorgeous stencil. I'm going to apply my volume paste. This is modeling paste by Stamperia. It's nice and thick and I'm going to apply it over the stencil in different areas. I'm not going for the perfect impression of the stencil, just randomly applying the paste. At this stage I don't know where I'm going to stick my focal points. I'm just playing with this layer without thinking what I'm going to do later on. Keep in mind also that I haven't prepped the pages at all, I'm just working directly on the paper. Again, this is the stone paper, so it takes any type of medium beautifully. I'm going to repeat the same process on the other side. I don't want to repeat the pattern as it is, so you see I'm rotating the stencil to get different angles and different designs that I haven't used on the other page. And as you are building your layers for a mixed media project or an art journal page, don't worry about what you're going to do on the next step. Just have fun while you're playing with the mediums, your stencil, your volume paste. No matter what you do on top of it, and if you cover up a part of it, it's not an issue as long as you had fun while making layer upon layer. And to tell you the truth, somehow everything comes together at the end. And you see here I'm taking my time, having fun with this first layer. I'm going to clean up the edges with any excess paste. Now that it is still wet, it's really easy to do that. And now I'm going to stop here and go wash my stencil because I don't want it to get clogged and lose that beautiful design. Don't forget to wash your stencils. Now the design is white on white at the moment, but I'm trying to catch the light so you can see what I have already on my page. This is not dry yet, so I'm going to leave it aside, and while this is drying I'm going to cut out my focal point. By the way, the volume paste really dries quickly, so you don't have to wait for ages. By the time I cut out my focal point, that will be fine. Now, as I cut out the lady, I'm not going to pay too much attention on all the details. Remember that nobody knows how that looked when it was on the page. So if you find that there are parts that are difficult, just chop them out, no one will ever know. She is quite easy to cut out, although she looks really complicated. The actual complicated design is inside the lady and not on the outside, so you see I cut her out in a flash. By the way, she is ginormous as you can see because I cut her out from the 12 by 12 paper pad, which means that she is going to make an amazing focal point on a page. However, you can find her in different sizes depending on which product from the collection you are using. You will find this design again and again in different sizes. Now for adding color on my background, I'm going with a couple of colors of acrylic paint, and the inspiration of the color combination comes from the paper pad, of course. I'm going for a very subtle look that will match the colors of the lady, but at the same time I don't want those colors to be super bright so that she stands out against the background. Now I'm using a very white brush so that I can apply the color easily. I like to blend the colors directly on the page, and you can see I mix both colors. So every time I dip my brush on one or the other color, and sometimes if I want that color to spread easier, I just dip my brush in water, just a little bit to help it spread out more. So when you see my brush is out of the screen of the frame, then I am just dipping it in water. Not too much, just a little bit to help that spread. Also notice that I usually do only brush strokes up and down, never side to side. Don't ask me why, that's the style that I like. You can do whatever you feel like. Now also keep in mind that as always you will find the full list of the supplies that I'm using, the exact colors of acrylic paint that I'm using. You will find that list either on my blog or if you are watching on YouTube in the description of the video. Now acrylic paint dries permanent, so I'm going to stop here and I'm going to give it a quick dry with my heat gun just to make sure that this first layer is completely dry and permanent, and then I can go on top of it and add a second layer of color here and there. This is not going to blend with what is underneath, which is going to give me a different look. Now of course the background as it is at the moment looks gorgeous already, so if you want you can definitely stop here. But as I always say, I'm just having fun with every layer. So in the previous layer I was playing with my volume paste and my stencil. On this layer I'm playing with my brushes and my acrylic paints plus color, which I love. So I'm just having fun, I'm not in a hurry to finish this layer, just enjoy the process, and if you find that you don't like what you have done, it's not a problem, just cover it up all with one color and start over. I always say that in art journaling, white gesso is your eraser, so if you don't like your color combination, use your white gesso, cover it up completely and start from the beginning. No one will ever know what's underneath. Now in my palette here you see that I added a little bit of ivory, which I'm going to introduce on my page in a bit. By the way, for this layer I'm using a dry brush and I'm dipping it just on the acrylic paint. I'm not using water at all, so I'm doing kind of a dry brushing. So the color goes more vibrant, it creates brush strokes, and it really adds a visual texture on the page. And of course, since I have all that ivory on my palette, I'm going to dilute it with water, and with a thin brush I'm going to add some splatters. I find that splatters somehow bring everything together. And now on to the next step, and this time I'm going to play with stamps. This is a stamp from the same collection, Magic Forest, and I'm using one that has a text and a little bit of a design. I am not going for the perfect impression, so I'm just going to use my fingers instead of using a stamping block. This way I will have a more organic and imperfect stamping. And for that I'm using black ink. This is my dye ink, and remember this is not permanent. I wanted to stamp that with a non-permanent ink because I want to show you later on a fun technique where you apply matte medium over it to cover it up while this isn't permanent, and you will see a little bit of smudging, which is going to give a great effect. Anyway, in a bit about that. So now I'm happy with the stamping. I'm going to bring in another stamp. This is a lovely border and I can use it on the edges. However, I don't want to have those straight lines on the edge. That's why every time I'm going to wipe them off. You can use your fingers, you can use a cloth, a paper towel. And again, I'm not going for the perfect impression. As you can see, I don't want to have this border all over the place, all around. So I'm going to repeat the process every time, wiping off that straight line and not doing the whole thing, leaving gaps as I go. And you can see here I was fed up with the paper towel. I'm just using my finger, always better to use your fingers, the best tool ever. Again, enjoying this step with my inks and my stamps. Of course, I do have to add a few splatters since I have the black out. I'm swiping a little bit of that ink on my glass mat, dilute it with water, and then again with a thin brush I'm adding the splatters. And the size of the brush is really important for those splatters. If you want to control them better, if you want them to be smaller, use a thinner brush. Now I'm also going to ink up the edges, adding a black border, very thin black border by the way, which I'm going to enhance later on by using another technique. But for now I'm going to do that. You know, this is a living project. As I go, I decide on different techniques and add different elements here and there, depending on where that project takes me. And now let's move on to another step. This time I'm using a buffer. You can use a nail buffer, you can use any file that you have, a sanding block, and I'm just going over those raised areas where I did use the volume paste through the stencil, and I'm just buffing them off, which is going to take out some of the paint from the acrylic paint, and you will be able to see that texture better. This is a technique that I shared on another video a couple of weeks ago, and I absolutely love the results, so I'm repeating it one more time. I make sure that I keep the buffer leveled to the page, and this way I touch only the mountains of that volume page, so I don't sand off any of the acrylic paint that is directly on top of the page, rather only the acrylic paint on top of the volume paste. And here is a close-up look on my background, which I absolutely love. I'm super happy with how it looks. And let's move on to the next step, which is sticking down my focal point. Now if you look at the girl, she is an elf. You can tell from her ear, but I don't want her to be an elf, rather I want her to be an actual human. So that's why I am cutting out from the scrap piece of paper one more flower, and I will cut another one, you can see that on the scrap there, so that I can stick them on top of her and cover up that ear to turn her into human from elf. And don't ask me why I had to do that, it was just an idea and I just had to stick with it. So I'm using a generous amount of mixed media glue at the back of my girl, making sure that she's nice and wet. This is really important to soak up the paper so that it doesn't create bubbles when you stick it on top of your page. Then I'm going to stick her on my page, and I will go over her with that mixed media glue because I'm planning to use the technique with the big brush markers to enhance the shadows, the colors, and to tint her in a different way. And because I covered up the girl with my mixed media glue, I'm going to cover up the rest of the page as well. This is going to give the same look and feel on the whole page, which is going to help everything come together. Plus, I will be able to use my big brush markers for shadows directly on top of my background as well as on the edges. Now, one thing that you need to keep in mind at this stage is that I did use my dye inks for stamping the black areas. So you see this isn't permanent, and as I brush over it with my wet medium, I may move it a little bit. However, I'm making sure that I don't dip my brush at all on the water, so I don't transfer water, and it doesn't move that much. It kind of helps that stamping blend better with the background. It's not that crisp anymore, but I absolutely love the effect. Plus now it is permanent since it is completely sealed. And now this is where I am going to cover up her ears with a couple of flowers that I cut out earlier. They are going to blend nicely with the rest of the design since she does already have flowers on her hair, so that doesn't look strange at all. I'm going to use my scissors to chop off any excess, make that nice rounded edge there. And here is a close-up look on what I was talking about, the stamping, the black stamping that wasn't permanent, but I did go over it with my mixed media glue. I hope you can see that it's not as crisp anymore, but it's lovely blended on the background, and to tell you the truth, I absolutely love this look. However, to get that look and not a big smudge, remember not to transfer water at all and go lightly over them with your brush. So now I'm going to bring in my big brush markers, and you see I have a new set here just so you can see what is in the market at the moment. I'm still going to use my older big brush markers since I have a big collection that they are not dry. However, I just had to show you what is at the market now. So you will find the exact same big brush markers but with two nibs. These are the dual big brush markers now, and you can use any one of the sides that you like. Now with the grey one I'm going outside of her outline, and I'm going to create some shadows. You can go over it and smudge it with your finger to create a very light shadow. I'm just showing you this look now, and later on I'm going to show you how it looks with a deeper shadow if I go ahead and use a brown marker. So it really depends on the look that you are going for. I am able to smudge the marker just because I did cover up the whole area with media glue, mixed media glue. You can use your matte medium, whatever you have, because this is going to turn the surface into a non-porous surface, so the marker, although is permanent, it needs a few seconds to dry. These seconds give me the opportunity to smudge it and create those soft shadows. Plus, these markers are transparent, which means that they are not going to cover up what you have underneath. They kind of work as watercolor, but permanent, in a permanent way. And this way you can use them on top of anything you have without covering the design at all, but it's going to tint what you have already. So you see here I'm using a blue and I'm going over her already colored hair to add a completely different tint, to enhance the colors, to make them more vibrant without losing whatever is underneath. One more thing that you need to keep in mind is that before you go on top of your design with your big brush markers, make sure that that mixed media glue is completely dry. Don't leave even a spot without making sure that it is dry. Otherwise, the tip of your marker is going to touch that glue. It's going to stick on the tip of the marker and you are going to ruin the marker, and this costs a lot of money. These markers are a dream to work with, but they are quite expensive, so you need to take a good care of them and you're going to have them for years. I had my previous set for over 6-8 years at least, and they are still going strong. Now here I'm going to give her a warmer tone on her skin, and you can definitely go with these markers and completely change her skin tone. So this is a great opportunity for you to play and tint whatever image you have to make it work for your project. If you follow the color theory and you use colors that match the colors underneath and they blend nicely together, you will get amazing results. For example, I could have gone with purple on top of her bluish hair to give her a completely different look and feel, or with pink, for example. And you know what, if you are not sure of how it's going to look, just try it on one side of your project, see how it looks, and if you don't like it, quickly before it dries, wipe it off and start over. So here I'm going to enhance her lips a little bit with the fine tip of my red marker. Always smudging to make sure that the color that I add is just a tint, it's just a wash and not oversaturate whatever I already have there. And I'm going to enhance the color on the leaves. So this way they are brighter, as you can see. Just some random brush strokes here and there on the leaves will do the trick. And now they pop better against her hair. Of course you can add even more shadows. You see she is more bright now than she was when I cut her out. She has more shadows. I absolutely love this technique with my brush markers, and I always feel that it brings my subjects into life. And since I'm enhancing all the colors, I'm using the fine tip of the yellow marker to add some yellow on her crown or whatever that is. I will also use the same marker to add a little bit of yellow at the center of the flowers. And I hope you are not already bored with this technique, because I can go on and on forever adding little details, enhancing shadows here and there. So here I'm going with the brown one. No, actually this is Indian Red, one of my favorites, and I'm going around the edges. And I'm going to tell it one more time because I get a lot of questions about this technique. Remember, for this technique to work, you need to work on a non-porous surface. Otherwise, the brushstroke is going to dry instantly and you will not be able to smudge it out. So I did that all around the border, and then I'm going to show you how it looks with a darker shadow around her on one side. I don't want to add that darker shadow in front of her face. So I'm just going to stop here with my big brush markers, and I'm super happy with the result. One thing that you can do, and that's completely optional, if you want to help some shadows pop even more, if you want to add some details here and there, you can always grab a very thin marker. This is a thin black marker, and I'm just drawing some lines in areas where I think that I need to help that design pop against the background. Now I'm going to cut out one of those labels from this page, and this is an exercise of braveness for me since it is at the back of the front cover and I don't want to ruin that. But anyway, you have to do what you have to do. Just use the paper and stop hoarding it. That's why I'm going to cut out this one, and I'll just try to erase from my memory that I cut out the front cover. Anyway, these are the things that we crafters have to fight with. I am going to cut it out, and this is going to be the quote for the other page. I'm inking up the edges and I'm going to stick it down again. I will use my mixed media glue to stick it down, and I will also cover it completely on top. I'm doing that because I want to have the same look and feel, the same texture on top of it as the rest of the project. Now I also have the ribbons from the same collection, that's why I'm going to use some of them here. I am going to add some interest here and there using many of these designs. Before I stick them down, I always like to cut out the element that I'm going to work with. I never just peel off the backing from the whole thing and go to town, and this prevents me from ruining the rest of the designs. And don't ask me how I know. So anyway, I'm going to transfer them as if they are a part of the same design. These are not going to show a lot at the end. Again, working in layers, don't worry if you cover up some of those things. They all work together at the end. When it comes to transferring those images, don't worry if you don't transfer something perfectly. It's all part of the process. They are going to look organic or as if it was intended. So don't worry at all. Just relax and play with your ribbons. Now notice that for transferring my images, I tend to use this ball tool. I find it really handy, and I'm going to show you in a bit that it is really easy to transfer those images. Even if you don't have any tool at all, you can just use your fingers. So you see, at some point I was done working with that ball tool. I was going for a more organic look and imperfect transferring. That's why I'm just going to start using my fingers. And I was really amazed of how perfectly they transferred. Turns out I didn't even need to use that ball tool, and I didn't even get an imperfect transfer. Look at that, how amazing it transfers, and so easily. Now from the ephemera pack, I'm going to use one of the big keys, and I'm going to ink up the edges. Keep in mind the ephemeras are stickers, so you can always peel off the backing and stick them down. But before I stick it down, I'm going to make a little hole at the center of my key, at the top of my key. This way I will be able to thread some string just for fun, to add some extra texture. This gives the eye something extra to look at, something unexpected. And since this is a mixed media project, it's always nice to introduce different textures. So you can introduce something like a thread, a string, like I'm doing today. If you can incorporate a piece of fabric or burlap, it's super fun. You can also add something metallic. So I glued down the key in place, and for that I didn't use my mixed media glue. Plus I didn't cover it up with my mixed media glue because this has a kind of shiny look. No, it's not shiny. I would say it has a satin finish, so it matches perfectly with the rest of the project. I did grab a couple of leaves again from the Ephemera pack. I inked up the edges, but I need to give them the same look and feel as the leaves and the colors that I have on the girl. That's why I'm grabbing the two markers that I used on the girl, and I'm smudging a little bit of that green that I used on the leaves on the girl, as well as the blue that I used on her hair. So this way I will bring the same look and feel on the other page where I will use those leaves. Now I'm going to bring in my Crop-A-Tile again and do a hole on both those leaves so that I can turn them into dangling charms. So I'm just going to thread them through those strings, the two strings that I have, tie a little knot, and you can have them as long or as short as you like. You can even stick them down later on if you want. Remember, those leaves are from the Ephemera pack, so they have a sticky back if you peel it off. However, I'm just going to leave them there so they can move freely. Now at this stage I find that the string is super clean and bright, so I'm just going over it with my finger blending tool. And I'm pretty much done. You know what are the finishing touches that I always like to add. I'm just using my white gel pen and I'm adding some highlights. I'm using a Sakura white gel pen. This is number 10, and again you will find it linked down below, just like everything else. And finally, some white splatters. I like to use lately calligraphy ink for that. I'm also protecting her face so that not too many falls on top of her face. And of course, for this step you can use white acrylic paint and just dilute it with water. So that's it, I'm going to call this page done. So there you go, you had another one of those long videos today. I hope that you had fun as much as I did creating this page. If you did, don't forget to leave me a comment as well as hit the like button. Here are some close-up photos where you can see all the details better. Links to everything I use can be found down below. Thank you all so much for joining me today, and I'll see you all next time.